everyone, and welcome back to my channel. This looks a little bit different than the last time you saw it. As I said last time I made a video, we were in the process of remodeling my room. I love it. We've painted the walls a different color, two different colors actually. This is now a blue where it used to be a purple, and that is very clearly red. I'm still in the process of settling everything in, but the first thing I did, and you'll all get a kick out of this, the first thing I did was rearrange my bookshelf. Because, you have to take all of the books off of it in order to move it. And we had to move it to get to the wall. So the very first thing we did to get rid of some of the boxes was put the books back on the shelf, which meant that I got to go through them. And I did get rid of some of them. Yes, it hurt me too, but at the same time, there comes a point in any writer, reader, literary agent's career where you learn this unshakable truth. And that truth is that no matter what you do in this industry, you will acquire books, whether intentionally or not. It just happens. Suddenly you have more books and not enough shelf space. And so the only way to fix that problem is to get rid of some or buy more shelves, right? As a literary agent, I have also gained an ability to read the first paragraph and know if it's a book I want to read. This is something that any agent who has spent much time in the slush pile knows. If you're unfamiliar with a slush pile or this terminology, a slush pile is what happens when people just cold submit. It all gets tossed into the slush pile, and it becomes this never-ending chore. This is why submissions take so long, is because right now, alone, I have at least 70 emails to go through. Alone. And this is since March. I can't go through that many emails a day, especially when all of them are like, here, read my book. And so I have to, spend some time reading to figure out if I want the book or not. So this is why the submission process takes so long. All that to say, we've learned this thing. And that thing is that if you read the first paragraph or two, and if it doesn't capture you, you probably won't like the rest of the book. Which is why we also say make your first paragraph really, really strong. Make your opening really, really strong. If you spend any time on anything in the book, spend that time on the opening paragraph and sentence. So, without further ado, I thought I would go through some of the books on my bookshelf, namely the classic books on my bookshelf, read the first paragraph in the manner that I would if I found it in my slush pile, and come up with whether or not I would actually take it on. Please don't hate me if I hate on your book of choice. Okay, without further ado, let's go. We're going to start with one of my favorite books, and that is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I made a video about this earlier, last October, I think. You can go find it there. But let's get right into this. So, the way that I would go through a submission, if this was a submission, is half the time, query letters are great and all if I want more information about the book after I've read the first paragraph. But that's the thing. I don't often read the query letter before I read the paragraph unless I'm interested, right? Or if it's okay, I need the background for this, which, if I need background for this, you should probably rewrite your thing anyway. All that to say, Chapter 1, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. You don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. That book was made by Mr. Mark Twain, and he told the truth, mainly. There was things which he stretched, but mainly he told the truth. That is nothing. I never seen anybody but lied, one time or another. Doubt it was Aunt Polly, or the widow, or maybe Mary. Aunt Polly, Tom's Aunt Polly she is, and Mary, the widow Douglas, is all told about in that book, which is mostly a true book, with some stretchers, as I said before. So, this is kind of an exception to the rule. Typically, if I were to analyze this, which is the point of this video, if I were to analyze this, I would say there's a really good voice here. A little stumbly because of the dialect that it's written in, so it's a little tricky to read out loud if you've not grown up around this style of English. So as someone who's grown up in Colorado, reading a ton of books, and familiar with what is generally referred to as proper grammar without double negatives and stuff like that, this is a little stumbly to read, hence the stumbling while I was reading it out loud. However, the voice is on point. It sets the scene enough. You know who this character is from the get-go, right? You know Huckleberry Finn. Whether or not you've read Tom Sawyer, ideally you've read Tom Sawyer and you know who he is from that perspective, but you've read enough from his voice that you already know what kind of book you're getting into. Clearly he has some circular narration effects. There's a lot of repetition in that first paragraph. If I were looking at this as a submission, I would keep reading. Which is a good thing. The book's been published for how many years? Originally published in 1961. So, you know, I would keep reading. And I told you, this is one of my favorite books. But even then, as I keep reading, then now the way that the book winds up is this. So he's about to spoil Tom Sawyer for you. Tom, when he found the money that the robbers hid in the cave. So here you see Huckleberry adjusting to a new normal. Clearly struggling to adjust to a new normal. He ran away, Tom found him and brought him back. But he's getting used to this new way of living that he's never lived in before, which is all important backstory. And as you can see here, it all happens within the first chapter for sure. Then we have an incident where Tom goes to see a fortune teller, and by the end of chapter 3, which is what I was looking for, so by the end of chapter 3 we're into the action, which is the goal. By the end of chapter 3, so if you are writing a book, especially if you're writing a book in the style of the older classics, you have to introduce us into a character, you have to get our interest, right? Clearly, this book, like, the action doesn't pick up until chapter 4. Not really. But the action is hinted at. We know there's a character who's unhappy with his current living situation. We get past that exposition pretty quickly into chapter 2, where we get more character interactions. We get some setup. We get some world building. And by chapter 3, we are fully into, we're off on this adventure, right? Especially when it comes down to the main antagonists are introduced, the main protagonists are very clearly there. Jim is introduced in chapter 2, stuff like that. So, all that to say, yes, I would accept this book, or at least request a full. Next up, let's talk about the Scarlet Letter. Would I or would I not request a full of this book? See, here's the thing. Scarlet Letter starts with what we call the custom house, which is all an introductory thing. And it goes on, for at least in this copy, 30 pages. Now, when I was reading this in high school, I distinctly remember being severely confused. So let's see if that confused effect is still present now that I've graduated college. Because, and here's the thing, if Hawthorne had to submit this book to publishers and literary agents today, would he have submitted the first 30 pages of the custom house as his entire, here's the book? Would you like it as part of his proposal? Or would he have started in chapter 1? Unclear. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read both of them and come up with my consensus on both of these. It is a little remarkable that, though disinclined to talk over much of myself and my affairs at the fireside and to my personal friends, an autobiographical impulse should twice in my life have taken possession of me in addressing the public. The first time was 3 or 4 years since, when I favored the reader, inexcusably and for no earthly reason that either the indulgent reader or the intrusive author could imagine, with a description of my way of life in the deep quietude of an old manse. Yeah, I would be passing right here. That's 2 sentences in total. Yeah. See, at that point, having that be 2 sentences, granted, proper grammar for sure. It's excusable because of the way that they use em dashes and semicolons. But, I am bored already. So we're just gonna move on to the first chapter, and I'll go from there. A throng of bearded men in sad-colored garments and gray steeple-crowned hats, intermixed with women, some wearing hoods and others bareheaded, was assembled in front of a wooden edifice, the door of which was heavily timbered with oak and studded with iron spikes. Okay, I'm curious. I can see the scene here. The founders of a new colony, whatever utopia of human virtue and happiness they might originally project, have invariably recognized it among their earliest practical necessities to allot a portion of the virgin soil as a cemetery and another portion as a site of a prison. In accordance with this rule, it may safely be assumed that the forefathers of Boston had built the first prison house somewhere in the vicinity of Cornhill, almost as reasonably as they marked out the first burial ground on Isaac Johnson's lot, and round about his grave, which subsequently became the nucleus of all the congregated sepulchres in the old churchyard of King's Chapel. Certain it is that some 15 or 20 years after the settlement of the town, the wooden jail was already marked with weather stains and other indications of age, which gave a yet darker aspect to its beetle-browed and gloomy front. Okay. Yes, we get an idea of the time. Yes, we get an idea of the setting. Alas, I'm bored. Bored to heck. No. The short answer is no, I would not take this book on if I found it in my submission box. And here's why. In all of that, and everything that I just read, I have no idea who the main character is. I have an idea of the setting, for sure. I have no idea. I mean, I could guess that perhaps there would be some drama about a prison break, or yeah, if you're going to spend that much time talking about graves and prisons, I want those to have some consequence in the book. And it's been a while since I've read this, but as far as I can remember, those don't have much of a consequence. Remind me if I'm wrong, please. Tell me if graves and prisons become really important in the Scarlet Letter. But if you're going to spend that much time talking about that in your opening, you're going to lose your agent, who you're trying to pitch to, and that's not worth it. So let's move on to another book, because I'm bored of this one. Alrighty, next up, In Cold Blood. This is a true crime novel. If you want to be chilled to the bone, I recommend it. I remember it being very good. I remember enjoying it. It started a genre. It's a novelization of a biography or autobiography. Something like that. But it's true crime. This actually happened. You can go find the crime scene photos, which is kind of terrifying. We looked at them in class. Let's just jump into it, shall we? The village of Holcomb stands on the high wheat plains of western Kansas, a lonesome area that other Kansans call out there. Some 70 miles east of the Colorado border, the countryside, with its hard blue skies and desert-clear air, has an atmosphere that is rather more far west than middle west.
The local accent is dodged with the prairie twang. The ranch hands hazelnuts, and the men, many of them, wear narrow French trousers, stockings, and high-heeled boots with pointed toes. The land is flat, and the views are awfully extensive. Horses herd the cattle, a white cluster of grain elevators rising as gracefully as Greek temples are visible long before a traveler reaches them. Holcomb, too, can be seen from great distances. Not that there is much to see, simply an endless congregation of buildings divided in the center by the main line tracks of the Santa Fe Railroad, a haphazard hamlet bounded on the south by a brown stretch of the Arkansas River, on the north by Highway Route 50, and on the east and west by prairie lands and wheat fields.
Very frame affairs with front porches. Okay, so at this point, my instinct is I like the voice, I like the style, So I'm going to skim ahead and see how quickly we get to the action. So, down by the depot, the postmistress got with passenger trains, and that really is all, unless you include as one must the Hookham School. There's a drought going on. Until one morning in mid-November of 1959, few Americans, in fact few Kansans, had ever heard of Hookham. Like the waters of the river, like the motorists on the highway, and like the yellow trains streaking down the Santa Fe tracks, drama, in the shape of exceptional happenings, had never stopped there. The inhabitants of the village, numbering 270, were satisfied that this should be so, quite content to exist inside ordinary life, to work, to hunt, to watch television, to attend schools, socials, choir practice, meetings of the 4-H club. But then, in the earliest hours that morning in November, a Sunday morning, certain foreign sounds impinged on the normal nightly Hookham noises. Yes. Okay, so, we're still within the first chapter. We're at the end of the 5th page-ish, before the first break into the second chapter. And we get that hint of, okay, here's what's coming. Like, set up the lazy, quiet, sleepy town, so on and so forth. And then now, we have something changes. That's exactly where the story should start. On the keening hysteria of coyotes, the dry scraping of scuttling tumbleweeds, racing, receding wail of locomotive whistles, at the time not a soul in sleeping Hookham heard them. 4 gunshot blasts that, all told, ended 6 human lives. But afterward the townspeople, theretofore sufficiently unfearful of each other to seldom trouble to lock their doors, found fantasy recreating them over and again. Those somber explosions that stimulated fires of mistrust, in the glare of which many old neighbors viewed each other strangely, and as strangers. Whew, okay, yes, I would definitely keep reading, because that line is so good, and juxtaposing the quiet of the town, the setting of everything that was before, right? This is a perfect example of show us how things were, show us the instant things changed, and then show us how they are now. Beautiful writing, beautiful tone, beautiful word choice. There's a reason that this is still a popular book held as classic literature. Because that chapter alone is so beautiful. There's such a difference between the quiet, sleepy town to telling you, and this is when things changed. We know things are going to change. Everything that was supposed to not stop here, all of the trouble, all of the danger, all of the mistrust, it all stopped here on this day when 4 gunshot wounds ended 6 human lives. Anyway, I'm fanning. I'm going all fangirl now about this book, which says something about me. But it's beautiful writing, so yeah, I would take this on. Alright, I hope this has helped you have sort of an insight into the mind of a literary agent. Doing this with classic books is obviously very different than doing this with a slush pile. The number of times in a slush pile that I find myself just saying no, 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 it's really high, but I hope this helps you know what we're looking for. I hope this helps you know, like, why we should go back and study classic books and classic writing. Obviously, some of them are going to be better than others. Clearly, there's different things you can learn by reading different types of books. Like reading Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer, that's a great way to study how to use dialect and dialogue and what words to change and what words not to change so that it's still readable. Reading Capote is a great way to figure out how do I use poetic verbiage in a way that the layman can understand. So I can still write with beautiful word choices and beautiful syntax and all of that without it being not understandable, which is, I think, where Hawthorne fell short with the Scarlet Letter. He uses a lot of really large words when they're not necessary. I think it was a part of the times, like it's just part of being a writer when he was trying to be a writer, or when he was a writer. I guess he succeeded in being a writer. Anyway, so I hope you found this helpful. I hope you found this interesting. going into and reading these first chapters of these books. Maybe I just helped you find your new favorite read. But until next time, I'll see you then. If you like these videos and want to see more videos like this, or you have questions for me, put the questions down below. Maybe you have a book that you want me to do this with, a favorite classic of yours. Maybe I have it on my shelf and I can do that for you. I would love to hear from you though, so reach out to me on social media at @AuthorJJHanna. You can find me pretty much anywhere. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye!